and to help us explore more the political turmoil in Syria, we're joined over the phone, and we're joined from Cairo by Dr. Osama Raslan, a political analyst, and Mohammed Abu Shama, journalist and political writer. A very warm welcome. Dr. Raslan, what is the impact of HTS entries to Damascus in Syria and the region and globally?
Thank you, first of all, for having me. Well, actually, we're talking about a historic event from day one. That started like 10 days ago. It's a historic event. It has been proceeding with an unprecedented pace. But historic here is not necessarily used in a purely positive sense to everyone involved. As you must know, and as everyone with the slightest interest in Syrian affairs knows, Syria has always been a diverse society in terms of almost everything, including basically ethnicity and faith. So, if we concede to this fact of long-established diversity, one may very well expect equally varied ways of receiving those news. So such takeover on the mass does not necessarily augur ill or augur well. It all depends on how it will unfold in the very near future. But I'd like also to highlight the fact that despite those differences in taking up such a news and digesting them, one feeling, I believe, remains common among everyone involved, regardless of any affiliative consideration, which is bracing for the future. Nobody knows what is going to happen in the very near future.
Dr. Aslan, what's your narrative on the situation, on the entire situation, sir?
Well, the developments, as we can see them, and if we adopt an analytical approach to media coverage throughout almost the whole world, you're going to find them using words such as lightning offensive, swift developments, and other synonyms referring to the same meaning. How rushed and unexpected those developments have been. Still, with an analytical hindsight, I would tell that these developments could not have happened without prior planning and careful calculations and even arrangements by and between the direct parties concerned. Of course, here I'm talking about international parties into whose or against whose interests what is going on in Syria has been taking place and culminating into the fall of the Assad regime. What lies ahead for post-Assad Syria remains the most pressing concern to everyone. Regretfully, it seems that this is not a decision in the hands of the Syrian people only.
Okay, Mr. Abu Shama, how did this historic event unfold, and what lies ahead for Syria after Assad?
In the beginning, I'd like to have me and I salute you and your special guest and to you, the viewers. The event is successfully paced as we've all surprised us that affect the future of Syria and the upcoming days in light of the armed forces control on the Syrian landscape and the existing Bashar al-Assad in that day. As stated by the CNN, and there are talks that led to this collapse properly that prevented the fighting within Damascus and outside Damascus, and we hope the safety for the Syrian people as each topple for a system or regime naturally would lead to the chaos and the violence actions, and that would increase the pain of Syria.
Dr. Aslan, Dr. Aslan, how do you read the Syrian's Prime Minister's recent statements that he will cooperate with any leadership chosen by the Syrians?
Well, he almost has nothing else to do. He is obliged to do so. The man is out of options. And this takes us to the very next notion to be highlighted, which is the challenges lying ahead. Because, you know, the leading Syrian figures, the leading figures on the Syrian arena are, of course, so diverse in terms of their interests, their goals, and their international or regional supporters. And this brings ahead so many challenges. Again, Syria is a diverse society. How that diversity would work? Would it work well or work against the Syrians themselves? It's all about how they're going to agree on a certain future. We should not forget the fact that so many flags have been flown across Syria over the last 12 years. Another challenge would be what becomes of the large arsenal of the Syrian army. This question is particularly of concern of that arsenal, whether it belongs to the Air Force or the Naval Force or ground forces, which might have more than conventional weapons. What happens if all this falls into the wrong hands? One more challenge is the chances.
Sir, can you elaborate more the meaning of the wrong hands from your own perspective, sir?
Yes, because there are strong chances for the revival of terrorist groups such as Al-Qaeda and Daesh and others, of course. Let's not forget what Hayat Tahrir al-Sham or
Sir,
HTF,
in Syria or in other places in the region?
In Syria, basically in Syria, of course, because you do not have control. Syria is now, you cannot say that Syria is under control now. Let me give you a proof of this. What did Israel proceed with this very day? It advanced, militarily advanced in East Qunaytira. This is the first military action by Israeli forces in this area since 1974. So nobody feels assured about the situation in Syria, the current situation in Syria, or what becomes of Syria in the near
How
future.
does Israel feel, sir?
Again, please?
How does Israel feel about what's happening?
Well, I would say, well, according to a statement, an official statement by Yitzhak Katz, the Israeli Minister of
Defense
Defense.
Minister.
Yeah, and the Israeli Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, they said that they are so jubilant about what happened, the fall of the Assad regime. They say that they have managed to cut off the main military arms the Assad regime has been using over the last decade or more, basically talking about Iran and the Lebanese group Hezbollah, which is Iran-backed, as everyone knows. So they are jubilant, they are upbeat about what happened. They are so happy about it. But this raises other questions about the future of Syria, the future of occupied Syrian lands, which are occupied by Israel.
Sir, I'll leave it there and I'll go to Mr. Abu Shama based on Ghazi's statement. Sir, how could the Prime Minister, along with the other factions, ensure the functioning of institutions and public facilities and to promote security among citizens?
The situation naturally is tangled and complicated and hard to control it. The state of case that started in a way this morning, after the spread of the news of Bashar al-Assad's leaving the country and the understanding with the Prime Minister to keep him and to try to maintain the Syrian assets, which is a good step, yet all the indicators related to HTC is not assuring us, and the internal situation in Syria is very much concerned, as these factions under the HTC are conflicted factions, and it is well known, following the step of toppling al-Assad, to go back and fight each other. Also, there is a great disagreement between them and the northern forces. All these matters might affect the stability of Syria that we do not wish, and we hope that the existing government to move from the legitimacy of arming to the constitutional legislation and to the transitional period of civil leadership.
Sir, you hope, but could you predict what's going to happen?
In fact, no one can predict what
Perfect,
would happen
yes.
during this session following the past 11 days. All the optimistic nor the pessimistic said the same several scenarios, and all went down with the successive events. No one can predict the future, and whoever think for Syria and made this scenario are people who have interest and planned this for a long time ago and succeeded to happen, and no one can know decisively that the decision in Syria is dominated by several countries. On top of them, the two main powers, the USA and Russia, are...
What do you think, sir, these main powers are going to do and react, and how are they going to be reacting now towards Syria and the Syrian people?
As indicated, your kind guest at the Israeli forces exceeded the limits of the truce since 1974, and between Israel and Syria, and they are about to break the ice in the Golan Heights. Israel naturally won't accept the presence of ideological or religious armed forces that are linked with al-Qaeda and ISIS. That would push Israel to exceed its limit and to take the privilege of the current situations, as well as the Syrian abilities to impose a real status on Syria. That's a sense that showed since the upon the leave of the al-Assad, and tried to impose a new reality, as we used to throughout the past years of the events overwhelmed in the Middle East. And the Syrian reality is tempting for Israel to take advantage, which is going to be very risky, as well as in northern Syria, that is have great much of concern. That is an area of
Okay, I'll be back again to you, sir. Dr. Raslan, who are the key figures leading Syria's transition, and what challenges do they face?
It's a compound question, actually, but the key figures to be seen leading Syria's transition are yet to be specifically known. For a start, the head of HTS has said that the incumbent Prime Minister of Syria, Mohammed Maghazi al-Jalali, would keep his post until further notice. We keep coordinating among Syrian state institutions. But I believe all names, parties, coalitions, and more generally all Syrian players and actors, as well as their supporters, will claim a stake in the future of Syria. It would be a matter of being a stakeholder or a stumbling block. This is yet to be seen.
A stumbling block, sir, you said.
Yes, yes. Each and every party to the Syrian crisis now, I would say it's a crisis, would serve either as a stakeholder, a pro-construction stakeholder, or a stumbling block. This is what I expect to have in the near future. When it comes to the challenges, again, I mentioned a couple of them minutes ago, but let me add the following. Because we have international superpowers that have direct presence, ambitions, and geostrategic interests in Syria. How is this going to play out? This is another difficult question. One more challenge is the geographic unity between Syria and neighboring countries that are fearful
Yes, sir.
of.
Could you please, sorry to interrupt you, but could you elaborate more about what's going to happen about this specific topic you're discussing now?
Yes, yes. Neighboring countries have strong and very legitimate fears about a potential dominoes effect that would take the Syrian experience, at least even partially, into their own soil as neighboring countries. And when it comes to neighboring countries, let me tell you this. We can categorize neighboring countries into three groups. First, countries with deep concerns about potential fallout of the Syrian turmoil into their own soil. Here we're talking basically about Lebanon, Jordan, and Iraq. The second category would be Iran and Russia, both of which have direct military presence in Syria, which means that they need to negotiate the situation and even the future of their personnel and their wider interests in Syria, not only with Syrians, but mainly with other international players in Syria as well. The third category of countries, of neighboring countries, is Israel, which as usual has not spared any time and has already proceeded with a military operation like I mentioned a couple of minutes ago.
Sir, you mentioned that Israel is very happy and they're jubilant about what took place. Do you think what took place is in favor of Israel or against Israel, sir?
You mean the whole situation in Syria now?
Yes, exactly, sir.
Well, any situation of non-statehood would be for the benefit of an established neighboring country, not to mention Israel, of course, in this situation, which is an occupation force in the first place. They have already taken the Golan Heights for the last decades. Now they are expanding their military presence, like I told you, in Qnews. It's a military action that is unprecedented. I mean, since 1947, because the Qnews region serves or has been serving as a buffer zone between the two warring countries. You know, at least theoretically, Syria and Israel are still at war. I mean, judging by the fact that they have not proceeded with a peace process or concluded a peace treaty like the situation is between Israel and Egypt since the 1937 war.
Mr. Abu Shama, with diverse and fragmented opposition, how can Syria's factions achieve unity?
It seems it's very difficult for the factions as there was some sort of rivals between these groups and neither united. Maybe in the past period, we're talking about those factions of religious nature, yet the civilian are groups that are in some European countries might return back to Syria to practice their right to participate. And does HTC to achieve the national reconciliation that we wish to happen? But it is difficult given the geographical event that would be pressure the Syrian front, but would give the freedom for choice for the Syrian people. Naturally, they would have an opinion in the future, and we hope to agree and reach a reconciliation for the interest of the Syrian state and its stability, as it is vital for the region. But with the state of liquidity, since al-Aqsa flood in 2023 and all what happened in the Middle East coming from Israel. And I don't think that in the favor of Israel, the stability of Syria, and that's what happened upon the first moment when advanced through the borders and taking the advantage
Because I'm running out of time,
the
sorry, I have to interrupt you and ask Dr. Raslan. How can the international community support displaced Syrians at this point and refugees in returning home?
Classes here, you have more than 1 million Syrian refugees that are now almost German citizens. I mean, in Germany. Others have already been flown to the United States or Canada or other countries. Some of them have established businesses in several countries, if not many countries worldwide. So I believe for the most part of those refugees, they wouldn't prefer to go back to their country unless there is something really attractive there, which is not the case right now. But when it comes to refugees that are really forming a strong and heavy pressures on neighboring countries, especially in Egypt and in Jordan, and of course in Lebanon and Iraq, there should be international cooperation to alleviate the suffering of those people and alleviate the pressures on those neighboring countries' governments and help find a safe recourse for those refugees into their country, Syria.
That was Dr. Usama Raslan, political analyst, and Muhammad Abu Shama, journalist and political writer. Thank you very much for your insights, and dear viewers, thanks for watching and stay tuned